"That's mine," she stuttered. She was covering her stuff shyly with her hands. In some bizarre accident, I had once seen her underwear, but she seemed even more flustered now. Seeing her like that, I couldn't help but. "My name's Bob Thompson. I'm a chef who runs a restaurant. My parents were cooks and I started my training at 16 and learned to cook for 8 years, and 2 years ago I started my own place. Things are finally starting to look up for the business. Sure, I'm making a decent buck, but other than food, I don't have much of an interest in anything else, so I live in a very average apartment. It's on the ground floor, so I have a yard, but other than smoking there, I don't use it much." That day was a day off from the restaurant, and I was taking it easy at home. Then, something fell into my yard. Sometimes stuff from the upstairs neighbors falls down, so I figured it was probably that, but when I went out to pick it up, it turned out to be a bright red bra. Just as I was thinking about how awkward it would be to return it, that's when it happened. "Help me, please," a voice came from above. Looking up, a woman in worn-out clothes was looking down at me, calling out, "I'm sorry, I can't open the window. I'm locked out on the balcony. What, are you okay?" Apparently, she couldn't get back into her apartment and was trying to get someone's attention by throwing the underwear she had. I promptly went to the landlord's office to explain the situation. Taking the landlord to the apartment above, I watched as the woman was rescued by him. With teary eyes, she thanked us and promised, "I'll come by to thank you properly soon." And with that, we called it a day. A few days later, that woman, called Miss Emily Wilson, came by with some homemade sweets. Emily, a struggling student, said apologetically, "It's not much, but it seems she doesn't buy new clothes very often, hence why she was wearing such tattered clothes the other day." Without making a fuss, I handed over the underwear that I had not yet returned. It was neatly packed in a bag. Her face turned bright red. She chuckled and said, "I'm sorry about this." When I concerned myself with how difficult it must have been for her after what happened yesterday, she said that apparently something got stuck between the windows and she couldn't open them. I should really clean my room. I need to be careful too. Just then, her cell phone rings. Seeing her hesitate, I said, "Go ahead," and she took the call, started to talk. Her tone of voice clearly dropped as she said, "Understood," before hanging up and sighing heavily. "Are you okay?" "Well, they cut my hours at my part-time job. I need to pay my student loans, so I guess I'll have to find another job." Apparently, Emily's parents are quite well off and they're the ones paying for her apartment. However, not wanting to rely on them forever, she's taken it upon herself to handle everything else on her own. Without giving it much thought, I asked her while she was feeling down, "Would you like to work at my place?" At the surprised Emily, I told her that I run a restaurant and that I was considering posting a job opening since we were short on floor staff. Then Emily bowed her head and said, "Please." For my part, it saved me the cost of the job ad, and thus Emily ended up working at my restaurant. Emily was very sincere, quick to learn, and above all, she was friendly. Since it's a French restaurant, floor staff often get asked about wines. Emily was also knowledgeable about wine, and in that sense, she was a great asset to us right away. She took on almost all the night shifts and ate her staff meals with relish. I can save on food expenses with staff meals. When I asked her to take a break once in a while as she's busy with university, that was the answer I got, and I couldn't help but laugh. She's struggling financially, but it seems like her pride won't let her rely on her parents. While I find her independence impressive, I can't help but feel that it's okay for her, still a young girl, to rely on others sometimes. Well, that's different for everyone. A few months have passed since Emily started her part-time job. This day was the busy Christmas season, and both the kitchen and the floor were bustling. We had more customers than expected, and the kitchen started to get overwhelmed. With a significant increase in customers from last year, we simply couldn't keep up with the dessert plating. Sorry, Emily, can you handle the dessert plating? Me, I'll show you once, just do it roughly. The desserts and fruits are all already prepared. In our place, we don't employ a pastry chef. Instead, the chefs take turns preparing the desserts. I showed Emily how to plate the desserts once, and she immediately started plating several just like it. Her work was efficient and, in fact, her plating was even better than mine. I found it intriguing, but I was too busy to ponder it. A few hours later, we finally got through all the customers and decided to have our staff meal. Since it's close to Christmas, there were cakes too. Emily was happily munching on her cake. You were a big help, Emily. Thanks to you, we managed. You're really talented. And no, I'm not. It was when Emily said this bashfully. Hey, who left these papers here? The ones for the certified baker. Matthew from the floor staff had the papers that had been left near the locker. It seems that in the hustle and bustle, someone moved the papers that were near the locker onto the desk. But a certified baker, that's a pastry chef certification. One of the chefs must be studying for it, but then, that's mine, Emily, her face redder than when her underwear was seen, covered her mouth, now white with cream, and raised her hand. Heck, it's so embarrassing. Emily quickly went to retrieve her papers. Come to think of it, Emily is in her sophomore year of college. She should meet the eligibility requirements for the exam. I was studying because I wanted to become a pastry chef, but I didn't want anyone to know in case I failed the exam. Really, I could have helped you study if you told me. What? I have the certification too, and I even have past exam papers. What? Emily's eyes widened in surprise. I met the exam eligibility too, so when I took it, I passed. I was lucky though. You must be busy studying for the exam, so would you like to switch from floor duties to handling desserts? You'll only be doing the plating, not making the desserts. Is that okay? You can do the dishes until the dessert orders come in, and then study when you're done. The busy season is almost over, and the certified baker is a national certification. It was my way of showing consideration, considering how tough the study must be. Ever since then, Emily has been in charge of dessert plating, and when there were no desserts to serve, she would study in a corner. She would ask me what she didn't understand, and sometimes a few young chefs would join in, quizzing each other about the problems, which was a fun topic in its own right. Of course, when it was busy, she would concentrate on plating, and as far as I was concerned, as long as she did her work, she was free to spend her spare time improving herself. In fact, the other chefs would study wine when they had spare time too. And so time passed, and half a year later. Bob, I passed. Oh, congratulations. Emily passed her certification exam splendidly. The passing rate isn't high, so it's truly her hard work that paid off. All the chefs in the kitchen were delighted, and it goes without saying that Emily's meal that day was a bit more luxurious. All the other chefs who had taken the exam on a whim had failed spectacularly. Bob, and everyone else, thank you so much. Not many people in my college class passed, so I'm incredibly happy. Emily had a beaming smile on her face. However, even though the exam was over, she was still a student. There's still a mountain of things she needs to study. So, as usual, I told her she could study when the restaurant wasn't busy, to which Emily, as expected, was hesitant, saying, I can't possibly have you do so much for me. But both in the kitchen and on the floor, Emily's brightness and positivity were a saving grace. Everyone wanted to help Dad because of Emily. When I told her this, Emily's face turned red, and she muttered, "I will repay this kindness someday." Several months later, a reservation for dinner came in. It was a couple who ordered the highest-priced set menu, and the serving was handled by Matthew. I was giving instructions briskly. "Emily, could you please prepare the dessert?" "Sure." Upon saying so, Emily started preparing the dessert included in the course. I always made a point of greeting customers who ordered the most expensive menu in my restaurant. Being a small business, I believed it was important to pay such attention to detail. After Matthew brought the dessert and some time had passed, I decided to head over to the customer's table, but when I got there, the customer was nowhere to be found. "They haven't even paid yet," I muttered, looking around the room, when suddenly someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Whoa, oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to startle you. I asked the staff to call for the owner, but we must have crossed paths." "I see. I apologize for the inconvenience." With that, I first had the customers seated. They had mentioned needing me for something, and for a moment, I tensed, wondering if it was a complaint. "We wanted to thank you." "Thank me? The truth is," the customer began to say. "What, Dad, Mom?" a surprised voice rang out. Looking over, I saw Emily with wide eyes looking at us. Dad, Emily's parents." "Yes, that's right. What are you doing here?" "Well, it's only proper to express gratitude to those who have been kind to our daughter, isn't it?" With that, the customer, no, the father of Emily, Harry, took out his business card. As I hastily accepted it, wait, the card bore the name of a major franchise company. I knew Emily's parents were wealthy, but I had no idea they were in the restaurant business. She wants to work in the food industry in the future and is studying for a certification. I hear you've been helping her. No, it's all thanks to Emily's hard work. I simply spoke the truth. Emily, looking embarrassed, muttered, "Dad, please stop." As a daughter, this must be a cringy moment. But, with parents who run a major franchise, she'll never have to worry about finding a job. Once you graduate, I'm sure she'll make an excellent manager. Emily is a quick learner and the life of the party. Haha, it's nice to hear that from the person who's been so helpful, Harry said when. I won't work. I won't work at my dad's place. I want to be a pastry chef at this restaurant. Wait, what? I was taken aback by her shocking declaration. I was, to say the least, frozen. All the more so because she made that declaration in front of her father. You said you need a pastry chef. The head chef even said he'd welcome me. I want to pay back your kindness. Please let me work. With that, Emily bowed her head. Indeed, Emily is in charge of desserts, and if she practices from now, she should be able to make desserts. Her serious eyes had me puzzled, but honestly, it would be a big help if Emily could work as a pastry chef in the kitchen. Moreover, when Harry says, Emily is so insistent, I'm sorry to ask, but could I ask you to keep an eye on her for a little while longer? I have no reason to refuse. We'll have to start studying recipes from tomorrow then. Yes, thank you very much, Emily replied with a cheerful smile. Fast forward a few years. My restaurant has become so popular with a 3-month wait for reservations. Actually, after that, a dish I supervised ended up on the menu of Harry's franchise store as a limited-time offering. The dish was unexpectedly well received, which made the restaurant quite popular. After graduating from college, Emily officially joined my restaurant as a pastry chef, and now we have a fair number of female customers who come specifically for Emily's desserts. Given its popularity, we're finally opening a second location, a cafe. I plan to have Emily take charge of the kitchen there. I really owe Emily a lot, and it's no exaggeration to say that we were able to open the second location thanks to her. But no one would ever guess that our meeting was sparked by a red piece of underwear and the fact that we're dating. Moreover, with the both parents' approval, I planned to give her a ring, but she said, let's wait until the restaurant gets on track, so they'll have to wait. Now the restaurant seems to be more important to her than I am, which is a bit frustrating. Oh well. By the way, the red bra that set off this fate-like string of events seems to have been finally thrown away, but the third generation one occasionally appears in the laundry. It seems that it was originally something she bought on sale, but now she apparently wears it as her lucky charm underwear for good luck. She wears it when something important is happening. Yes, on days like today. Bob, what are you doing? We're opening soon. I know. Today is the opening day of the second location. Customers are already lining up, and it's bustling. The two of us will open the door and probably greet them with smiles. Welcome. My name is Samuel Jefferson. I'm a 30-year-old office worker. Can't exactly say I'm living the high life in my 30s, but I'm getting by in my own way. Looking at my life, I wouldn't blame anyone for feeling sorry for me. After all, I live in a really run-down apartment. The only thing it has to offer is the good location and low rent. Other than that, it's all drawbacks. It's a 2-story apartment built about 50 years ago and a 5-minute walk from the nearest subway station. They did replace the overly rusted stairs with new ones, but the corridors are still full of rust, and because the apartment is of wooden construction, it lets in drafts. Because of that, it creaks all year round, and well, most noises get through. I can easily tell when someone comes home. People often ask me, why don't you move out? But finding a new place to move to is a hassle, not to mention the cost of moving. There aren't any inconveniences, and above all, the location is great and it's cheap to live here. You'd have a rough time finding a place with the same conditions. And as they say, home is where you hang your hat, right? There are no weird people among the apartment residents, so I'm able to live without much inconvenience. Given the size of the rooms, most are living alone. If an earthquake or fire makes it impossible to live in the apartment, well, I'll consider moving then, but since I'm single anyway, I guess it's fine to stay as is. I was thinking about things like that, but one day, a rainstorm on the scale of a hurricane hit the apartment. While the house was usually noisy, fortunately, the wind wasn't too bad. The sound of the rain was intense, but as this is usual, I intended to endure it with earplugs, or so I thought. No way. Oh my, what do I do? Oh no. I heard a voice, close to a scream, from the room next to mine. If I remember right, the corner room next to mine is where a female college student lives. This apartment is popular with students, and especially the corner rooms change tenants about once every 3 years. I think it's been about 2 years since she moved in. Up to now, I've only ever heard her on the phone, and our acquaintance was limited to greetings when taking out the trash. Why would she be screaming on a day like this? The commotion continued, and given the urgency and chaos of the situation, I decided to check on the room next door. I was thinking of saying something like, be a bit more mindful of the noise, if nothing was wrong. The noise was that intense. I rang the doorbell of the room next door. The rain outside was awful, and I was worried if the sound would be heard, but she came out promptly. Whoa, I ended up letting out a strange voice. Why, you ask? The female student who came out was drenched from head to toe, despite being indoors. She was drenched with water, and was even a bit see-through. I am sorry for the trouble, and I am looking like this. The ceiling is leaking here. Was I making too much noise? She looked up at me anxiously. She was a petite woman with a bob haircut and a beauty mark under her left eye. I felt my heart skipped a beat. This wasn't because she was completely soaked and the shirt became see-through, nor her pale skin without a trace of redness from the rain, giving off an unusual doll-like aura. It was because I saw her beauty mark and it reminded me of someone dear to me. When was the last time I saw her? How many years has it been? I was deep in thought when it happened. Outside, a bright flash lit up the sky, followed after a brief pause by a rumbling noise. There must have been lightning somewhere. Wait, what am I doing? This isn't the time to be reminiscing about the past. No, I just thought you sounded like having a hard time. But is everything okay with the leak? No, unfortunately, the place where it's leaking is too high for me to reach. Emily Forrest. Her eyes welled up with tears as she glanced back into the room. I'm about 5 feet 7 inches tall. But her, maybe just a smidge over 4 feet 11 inches. Actually, she might not even be that tall, to be honest. Anyway, she's small. Surely, with that height, she can't do much about the leak. Would you like me to help out, if you don't mind? Really, would you? It's okay. I'll handle the temporary fix. Meanwhile, try contacting the landlord, okay? Sure. You're a lifesaver. I guess it's her first time living alone. She seems to have forgotten that she could call the landlord when things go awry. She led me into her apartment, and I began to attend to the leak. At least I thought I could. Yeah, this isn't something a non-expert can fix. It's not a matter of just placing a bucket to catch the drips. There are just too many places where water's been seeping in, and in some spot, it's trickling down quite heavily. Presumably, water is flowing in a large amount from the spot that's affected the most, and it led to other pots to be wet and leaky. The ceiling of this apartment isn't too high, but I still need to stand on a chair to reach it. For someone like Emily, a better ladder would be needed. No wonder there's so much noise. Anyway, sticking towels onto the damp spots, that's frankly impossible, so I'm going to get some buckets from my place to at least prevent water from reaching the floor. While I'm doing that, she finishes the call to the landlord, so I ask her, half in jest, you don't happen to have diapers or anything, do you? Probably not, right? Diapers? No, I don't. That's what I thought. The absorbent material in diapers can soak up quite a lot of water. I'm going to go get some, so in the meantime, can you move anything that shouldn't get wet into my room? Okay. A single man's room is just dirty. I had nothing to lose, so I opened my front door, ran straight to the drugstore with my umbrella, and came back with a package of adult diapers. Who would have thought I'd be buying something like this at my age? I figured they might come in handy one day, but I didn't anticipate using them in this manner. I rushed back to Emily's room. She was diligently tossing the water that had gathered in buckets into the bathroom. It seemed like most of her belongings were moved into my room. Oh, you're back. Can we really deal with this using diapers? Yup, just watch. As I said this, I opened the diapers and began placing them absorbent side down on the floor. Absorption takes a bit of time, but they can hold a lot more water than a towel, making it the best way to quickly clean a water-soaked floor. Well, this knowledge is just something I picked up from an online forum. After that, Emily and I kept running back and forth to the bathroom until the rain became lighter, ensuring the buckets didn't overflow. Fortunately, the rain subsided within a few hours and the leakage seemed to have settled down. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your help. I was at a loss on my own. No problem, we're neighbors after all. So, when is the landlord gonna come to fix this? Oh, he didn't mention when. She must have been quite flustered. and probably isn't used to making inquiries over the phone. She seemed to have missed asking the most crucial question and was hanging her head in dismay. Do you think I can continue living in this unit? I wouldn't recommend it. It's supposed to rain for the next week. Plus, if the floor doesn't dry, it might get moldy. Moreover, it seemed like her mattress was also soaking wet and totally unusable. Seems like the landlord of this apartment is quite a negligent type. I couldn't expect any help from the landlord. Sometimes you encounter such landlords, but well, considering this location and the cheap rent, some drawbacks are inevitable. She looked paler as she groaned. Staying at a hotel right now would be too expensive. Living in such an apartment, she must be having financial trouble or trying to minimize expenses. She seemed to be heavily distressed, and then she glanced at me. I know it's a lot to ask. Yes, may I stay at your place for a few days? With that, she took a deep bow. What? I'm barely getting by with my scholarship and rent each month. I can't afford to go to a hotel. I know it's an impudent request, but I promise I will pay utility bills later. She said so, and honestly, I was torn. But she looked a lot like someone who was very dear to me. So, I couldn't just leave her in the lurch. All right, I'm mostly out for work anyway. Really? Thank you. I mean it, really. She looked as if she was about to cry, and I could tell she was really struggling to make ends meet. Young folks really have it hard these days. With these thoughts, Emily and I began to live together. I was mostly out due to work, and Emily cleaned my room and cooked meals in between her classes. She said she took on the household chores as a way of compensating the inconveniences she caused for me. Even though I ended up paying for the groceries due to her financial situation, as a single guy who hadn't had a home-cooked meal in years, it was actually a blessing to just buy ingredients and get to eat a home-cooked meal. Eventually, I reached out to the landlord and was told that the repairs would start a week later. Considering that it's a job that could be done in a day, our shared living situation seemed like it would end quite soon. I felt kind of a bittersweet feeling. Of course, I let her use the bed, and I've been sleeping on a new simple mattress, which has made it a bit harder for me to rest. But having someone else in the room just feels good, and it made me feel a bit more gentle. It was one of these days with her. As she was looking at her smartphone, she suddenly said, "Landlords have it tough too, with the compensations and all." Well, sure, repairs cost money, but they're getting rent income, so these are necessary expenses, I think. But the cost to compensate for the appliances ruined by the leak this time, that must be quite a bit, right? As she said that, I felt something was off. Of course, it's only natural for the landlord to cover the repair costs, but as far as I remember, the terms of our contract here didn't include compensation for appliances. Emily, the contract here states that even if something breaks due to some issue, the landlord won't cover the cost. What? Emily was so surprised that her eyes went round and she looked like she might jump up. It looks like she signed the contract without thoroughly looking at the terms. A common mistake among the young folks. That's not fair. In the end, it's the landlord who's to blame for not maintaining the place properly. But that's the agreement, right? Your only choices are to find a lease where the landlord will compensate you or to take out homeowner's insurance. I tried to calm her down, but she puffed her cheeks and protested. But I can't live here if I don't sign the lease. That's just unreasonable. Do you understand what it means to sign a lease? It means you agree to its terms, so there's no room to complain. I recommend you take the time to read it thoroughly before signing, to avoid scams and such. She hung her head and pouted. She really does act her age at times like these. It's a bit worrying because she's so young. Anyway, this new life with Emily felt quite refreshing for me. With the homemade meals she cooks every day, and the house kept so clean, and our conversations are always enjoyable, so a week just flew by. Emily, who always puts a smile on her face, is so adorable that I find myself thinking she must be popular. Her demeanor reminds me of my beloved little sister, Jessica, and it brings on a wave of nostalgic and somewhat painful feelings. "What's the matter, Samuel?" She was enjoying her meal so much, and I found myself staring at her. This made her tilt her head in curiosity. "Oh no, what am I doing?" "It's nothing," I replied with a smile, but they really do look alike. Especially when she's asleep. She's the spitting image of Jessica. One night, I happened to see her profile when I got up to use the bathroom. A small mole on her fair skin. The same hairstyle, the same age. Why do you look so much like Jessica?" I muttered quietly, and tears spilled down my face. As I was pathetically sniffling, she asked, "Samuel, what's wrong?" The sound of my sniffling and the rattling of the wind woke her up. "Damn, what am I doing?" "I am sorry for waking you. I'm fine, really. But you don't look fine at all." She got up and rushed over to me. As she looked up at me with worry in her eyes, I found myself spilling the words out. "You remind me of my sister." "Huh? My sister also had a mole in the same spot as you do, and her hairstyle was the same. If she were alive, she would be around your age. My sister died when she was in middle school. You resembled her so much, it made me think of what it would be like if she were still alive. My little sister passed away in a traffic accident just after she started junior high. Apparently, she was hit by a car on her way to school. It's been a long time since then, but we had a fight the day before the accident, and I never got the chance to make up with her. I'm still carrying that guilt. I'm sorry. This has nothing to do with you." "No, is your sister. Was her name Jessica?" "What? How?" The sudden mention of my sister's name had me so startled I thought my eyes would pop out. Why did she bring up Jessica's name? Seeing my reaction, she continued, "So you were Jessica's brother." Apparently, Emily was best friends with Jessica. I always had felt self-conscious about my mole, but Jessica said we were mole twins. After that, we started matching our things. Emily had been friends with Jessica since elementary school, and apparently she even had met me a few times then. Come to think of it, Jessica would always bring the same friend home. I've been wearing my hair like Jessica's since the day of the accident. It feels like, without that, Jessica would be forgotten by everyone. Supposedly, she was scared for the world that continued to spin without Jessica. I can understand that feeling. As if Jessica had never existed from the start. Just like that, the world keeps spinning without questions. She must have been afraid of that. I thought you might be related since you had the same last name, Samuel. I'm sorry, you must not like it. Seeing me dressed the same as your late sister. No, it's nothing like that. Thank you for carrying the memories of Jessica with you." As I said that, she thanked me again and again, tears welling up in her eyes. She and Jessica were best friends. She must have been at the scene of that accident, too. Losing her best friend in front of her eyes, blaming herself. That's why she tried to imitate Jessica and fill the void of her loss, I think. I truly felt glad to learn that Jessica had such a caring friend who held her so dear. A few days passed. Emily moved back into her room once the repairs were completed. She tried to give me some treats and money for utilities later on, but I politely declined. We should have just returned to nothing but neighbors. I made stew today. That looks delicious, thank you. For some reason, Emily keeps coming over to cook. Both of us found out that cooking by ourselves saves on food costs, and it's easier to cook for 2 portions than 1. So occasionally, while she's cooking her own meal, Emily cooks mine too. By the way, I think I'd make a good wife. Yeah, I think you would. Not that I want to be your wife, Samuel. Our conversation started to include exchanges like these. Truth is, after we talked about Jessica, she confessed her feelings for me. When I used to visit Jessica's house, I fell in love at first sight. You were my first love, she said. Honestly, I've always seen Emily more like a sister. I just couldn't feel the same way. But it felt too harsh to outright reject her, and too cruel to push her away completely. So it ended up like this. When will you look at me the same way? I wonder, at this rate, it might be impossible. I made it clear that I didn't see her in a romantic light, or so I thought. But she took it as a comment on her appearance, responding, I see. Then I'll have a makeover. 2 days later, she shocked me by dyeing her hair and getting a loose, wavy perm. Both of us were surprised. She seemed unsure if it suited her, but when I couldn't help but blurt out, "You look cute," she was overjoyed. She had always styled herself to resemble Jessica, not just to fill the void, but also because she lacked the courage to change her look. It seemed she had finally been released from her fear of forgetting Jessica by sharing her memories with me. Now that she's looking so different and cute, Emily occasionally comes over to cook. Well, honestly, it's bewildering. Because she is cute. She's far from resembling Jessica now, and there's a full-hearted meaning behind her gaze. Before I knew it, I started wanting to support and protect the slightly absent-minded and clumsy Emily. So that's how it went. A year after the leaky roof incident, when she became a junior in college, we officially started dating. We plan to get married after graduation, so we're practically engaged. Just for the record, we haven't done anything. Don't even think about creating an established fact before marriage. I'm half expecting Jessica to pop up like a ghost, saying, "Hands off my best friend, you know." After losing Jessica, I was terrified of time passing. I feared that my memories of her would fade and I might forget all the details about her. But now, it's different. I'm actually looking forward to the passage of time. I guess it's a sign that I'm able to look towards the future. Just a little bit longer until she graduates. I'll sort out what I want to do until then and look forward to it. With these thoughts, I dream of the happy family I'll build with Emily in the not-too-distant future. Did you forget? My unpleasant looks and history of nothing but bad luck sums up my life. I was set up by a colleague and got demoted, and my newlywed wife ran away from me too. The one laughing at my situation is my attractive boss at this new demoted post. Frozen like a deer in headlights, she whispered to me. It was my first time. Confused by her unexpected words, I was. My name is Timothy Sullivan. I'm 28 years old. I work at an event planning company. I just got married actually, and I am no longer a single man. With that new resolve, I thought I had my act together. But then, an unbelievable incident occurred. Who ordered the champagne for tomorrow's event? We don't have enough. Aren't you misspelling the digit? My boss's roaring voice echoes across the floor. Speaking of tomorrow's event, it's one I'm in charge of. It's an event to enjoy champagne and wine at a park in the city. I was the sub-leader for that event. Let me check the order form. As I rushed towards my boss, he frowned at me. He has a hard time dealing with me. It's often said that appearance matters for 80% of first impressions. Unfortunately, I was born with a rather menacing look. Apparently, people always seem to think I look angry. To add to that, I grew taller than one would prefer. My boss finds me intimidating due to my imposing presence. And now, I was approaching to him with a desperate form. For a moment, my boss seemed ready to bolt. There was my signature on the order form. But I didn't check this document before. Initially, I was removed from ordering the champagne. I was at a loss for words. One of my seniors on the team, smirking, called out to me, "You messed up big time, didn't you? What are you going to do?" Despite the critical situation, he was grinning from ear to ear. That's when it hit me. I remembered that the person in charge of ordering was my senior. My senior and boss began to whisper amongst themselves. This was not a good sign. My senior is likable and had good standing with our boss. My boss sees me differently than others as he dislikes me. I checked with Robert. "Timothy, it's your mistake after all." My boss, face red with anger, grabbed my collar. It was to be expected. This was the biggest event of the season. It's not me. I was removed from the wine team. No one cared to listen to my words. Robert kept smirking, looking at me. If he has time to laugh, he should do something. The event is tomorrow, so I decided to start calling all the wholesale liquor companies. No matter how much I say it's not my fault, everything will be blamed on me. I almost let out a sigh, but there was no time for that. I had to do as much as I could in the limited time. By the early morning of the event, all the champagne had arrived. I truly believe it was a miracle. A manufacturer I had a good relationship with had inquired to liquor companies outside the town for me. People who understand, understand. This phrase, which I have been repeating since my college days, I murmured like a mantra in my mind. Exhausted and dozing off at my desk, I could sense my colleagues coming in one after another. Everyone was amazed to see the delivered champagne. In my drowsy state, I heard Robert's voice. "If I handle it, it's as easy as this. I can fix the stupid mistakes of my juniors overnight." He must not have noticed me, dozing off, face down. He talked proudly, as if he had solved everything by himself. My colleagues also expressed their admiration, as expected. With his charming looks, eloquent speech, and pleasant demeanor, I thought again that Robert was indeed successful in life. Are you sleeping while Robert is working hard? Suddenly, I was pulled by the back of my neck and jolted awake. My boss was holding my collar, his face distorted with anger. I was immediately taken to the director's office. Apparently, I was going to be held accountable for this oversight. I felt thoroughly annoyed looking at the smug face of Robert in the corner of my eye. Demotion. What was communicated to me in the director's office was a transfer to a rural branch. In other words, a demotion. But I just got married. This is troublesome. My voice came out involuntarily. I've only been married for 6 months, and my wife is working too. She would also be troubled by a sudden transfer. Do I look like I care about your personal problems? Reflect on the harm you were about to cause the company at your new location. Fix that attitude too. My boss was now calling the new location by demotion openly. A transfer order was thrown at me. The destination was a small branch in a seaside town. I've been demoted from my sub-leader position as well. My salary will likely decrease accordingly. After leaving the director's office, I immediately sent a message to my wife. I didn't have the courage to tell her directly. However, she didn't reply immediately. A week after that incident, I found myself in the town of my demotion. It was near the sea, with the scent of the tide in the air. In the end, my wife left me. Just 6 months into our marriage, she made it clear to me when I got demoted. She couldn't quit her job, and she married me because I was earning well. It seems I'm no longer needed, as I've lost that value. I heard later that she had been involved with someone else before our marriage. My demotion was a convenient excuse for her to leave. You never know what life will throw at you. And now, at this new workplace, I have to start from scratch. The first time I showed up at work, everyone looked at me as if they were terrified. A towering man of 6'7", with a harsh gaze just sluggishly appeared. I knew their reaction was justified, but it still hurt. I may look intimidating, but I'm not one for fights. I can't boast about my strength, and I hate conflicts. Apparently, I seem cold to others, and they tend to keep their distance from me. This has been the case since my student days, and it hasn't changed since I started working. Those who get to know me well trust me, but few people make it that far. The new office clerk is a young girl, and she seems to be constantly scared of me. My other colleagues also treat me like I'm a delicate, touchy subject. There was only one person who treated me without any discrimination. That was the branch manager, Miss Lisa Richardson. She was an astonishingly beautiful woman. I was so stunned at first that I just stared at her. She always has her long hair loosely tied up and wore heels. Her lipstick was always red. She looked both pure and strong. 2 beauty spots lined up under her left eye, and when she smiled, her eyes narrowed in a way that was really charming. On top of that, she was a perfect beauty who was great at her job. She was particularly kind to me. I'm not being conceited. She really was especially kind to me. If I was eating alone, she would always invite me into the lunch group. If I was quiet, she would bring up various topics, trying to bridge the gap between me and the other colleagues. With her help, I quickly adapted to the workplace. It became more comfortable for me than the main office. People are not as they appear, she would tell our coworkers and people in the community while introducing me. In this rural setting, it's essential to build relationships with the local residents. From small to large events, our company seemed to handle almost all of them. And the office clerk told me that every group we worked with became a regular customer. Recently, I've even received fish from a local lady or dishes for dinner. In return, I get asked to do various things, like cleaning high places or changing light bulbs. For the summer dance festival, we're counting on you to take the lead, Timothy, Lisa said to me once I'd really settled into the local community. It appears to be conducted in collaboration with local elementary schools and community associations. I would probably be interacting with even more people than I am now. I wondered, can I really handle such a crucial role? I wondered if I could handle such an important role. I'm anxious about making a bad impression on people I meet for the first time. I don't want to put my coworkers, who have been so kind to me, in a tough spot. It was those colleagues who encouraged me when I was unable to respond right away. It's all right, we've got your back, they all reassured me. I had never been treated so gently before, and I almost found myself tearing up. It's all thanks to Lisa. When I look at her, she's perched irreverently on a desk, legs crossed, smiling. The heel caught on her toes, swaying, left a strong impression. Lisa usually appears prim and proper, but sometimes odd gaps in her character show. She can be surprisingly rough around the edges, or use crude language. Even though low heels would make her work easier, she always wears high stilettos. But these heels look cooler, don't they? That was a response when I asked why, and it somehow felt familiar, but I couldn't recall where I heard it before. As the day of the dance festival was around, the office began to bustle. One day, a local police officer from the substation attached to the office dropped by. He was deeply engrossed in a conversation with Lisa. Overhearing their discussion, it seemed there was some suspicious people around recently. There was an incident where a grade scholar was approached by a man with a sinister look, who tried to get the child into his car. As soon as I heard sinister look, I knew I was the one under suspicion. Lately, I've been helping local elementary school kids build floats for the parade. Apparently, some of the parents have named me as the unsavory-looking man. Just as I was sighing in exasperation, a man burst into the office with a force that seemed to kick the front door open. He was the president of the elementary school's parent-teacher association. As soon as he spotted me, he approached. You're preying on the children under the pretense of preparing for the dance festival. You're the worst person. He yelled at me and grabbed my collar. It seems his daughter got hurt. She had a scraped knee yesterday. He was treating me like a complete pervert. He continued to berate me for being ill-natured, unfriendly, and unmarried. I had nothing to say to him. Arguing back in situations like this is futile. I decided to stay silent. Officer, if you're here, arrest this man immediately. The president twisted my arm and tried to thrust me at the officer in the back. With such a strong force twisting my arm, I couldn't help but let out a cry of, "Ouch!" In an instant, the president's hand was knocked away with a great force. The one who knocked it away was Lisa. While glaring at the president, she tried to hide me behind her back. There was a height difference between us, so I was not hidden at all. "What do you think you're doing to my subordinate?" Stop making unfounded accusations without any evidence." The firmness and conviction in Lisa's words seemed to overwhelm the president. At the time his daughter was supposedly harmed, I was at the float-making site, surrounded by a bunch of kids. Lisa and other colleagues were at the site too. Even so, this man with his criminal-looking appearance. The president kept ranting despite the odds turning against him, making Lisa lose his cool. I believe judging people by their looks is questionable. Just then, from the entrance of the municipal office, we could hear the children's voices saying, "That's right. It's not right." It seemed they were worried about me not showing up for the float-making time and came to the office to fetch me. The children explained my innocence to the president in earnest and started crying, asking him not to bully me. At this, even the president seemed utterly perplexed and scratched his head. "I'm sorry, I lost my cool." He immediately bowed his head and apologized to me. The children looked up at me. I gave them a reassuring smile and said, "It's okay." They seemed relieved, stopped crying, and started to smile. We made up. They seemed happy. That evening, the real culprit was quickly arrested. The culprit was a young man from the next town over who bore a striking resemblance to me. "Why did you stand up for me? I could have been the criminal, you know." When we were left alone due to overtime work, I asked Lisa. I appreciated that she believed in me, but there was a feeling that she understood everything about me that was deeply intriguing. What did she know about me? I wondered. Maybe she was a bit inclined to pick a fight. Suddenly being faced with my baseless accusation, Lisa stared at me, dumbfounded. Then, she broke into a gentle smile. With her heels clicking, she made her way over and stood next to my desk. "Did you really forget about me?" She leaned in and whispered, causing my heart to race. Lisa reached out and propped up my chin. She looked straight into my eyes. It was my first time. "Will you remember if I do this?" Slowly, her hands reached out towards my petrified face. Instinctively, I squeezed my eyes shut. The next moment, my cheeks were being pulled with an unbelievable force. What are you doing?" My words were distorted as my cheeks were being pulled from both sides. Lisa chuckled. "Come on, remember it." As she said this, she extended her hand in front of me. A large silver ring was on a finger that was usually bare. The moment I saw it, my memory center kicked into high gear. "This ring." "What, this ring?" "It's the one I gave you, right?" Lisa watched me, grinning at my surprise. This ring was my first gift for a girl. When I was still in middle school, I frequently visited a bookstore where a girl worked. Though I say girl, she must have already been in college. The first time I saw her in the bookstore, I was surprised by how beautiful she was. While I was frequenting the bookstore just to see her, I noticed she was being avoided by the other employees. Perhaps I noticed it because I was facing similar isolation at school. When I listened to the conversations between the employees, it seemed the reason was simply because she was beautiful. Just petty jealousy among women. Short black hair and multiple piercings. Her nails were always painted black. Apparently, they didn't like her style. I thought about how tough it all must be for her. One day, right before closing, I really wanted to read a book, so I dashed into the bookstore. In the corner of the nearly closed shop, she was crouched down looking for something. Are you looking for something?" I mustered up my courage and spoke to her, which seemed to surprise her as she stood up. Her eyes, filled with tears as she looked at me, are an image I still remember. It made my heart pound. I lost my ring. Indeed, the silver ring she usually wore was missing from her finger. She told me it was a gift from her brother. There was no one else in the store. Silently, I crouched down on the floor and started to help her look for it. In the end, we didn't find the ring. She bowed her head to me and thanked me. I was frustrated that we couldn't find it, but I was happy to have shared that time with her. The next day, when I went to the bookstore, she was not there, and the usual group that spoke ill of her was. I was speechless at what the leader of the group was loudly boasting about. She was proudly talking about how she had thrown the girl's silver ring into the river. Apparently, the leader's boyfriend fell for the girl and that was the cause. Talk about spiteful. Feeling sorry for her after she searched so hard, I spent all my savings and bought a ring for the first time in my life. Later, when she was at the cash register, I slipped the ring onto her finger in the midst of the chaos. I clearly remember that I was so flustered that I put it on her left ring finger. Her surprised face with wide eyes, and the face of Lisa, who is laughing in front of me now, overlap in my memory. "You were the first one to put a ring on my left ring finger, Timothy." Lisa apparently noticed me at the company induction ceremony. She found out my department, my name, and while she thought of speaking to me someday, many years passed by. When it was decided that I was to be transferred here, she was so delighted that she even danced a little jig. No way. I became somewhat embarrassed and couldn't look at Lisa's face. But one thing became clear to me. Having been judged based on my appearance and feeling hurt by it, I realized that she understood my feelings. She had been sympathizing with me all along. So, is this ring valid? Or was it just a coincidence? Lisa tells me that after that, I became too embarrassed to go to the bookstore, but she had been waiting for me all along. I was surprised when you crawled around on the floor so earnestly looking for the ring for her. Ever since then, I've been concerned about you. I couldn't recognize Lisa, who had a completely different atmosphere from her student days. But talking like this, she hasn't changed at all from that time. Of course, it's valid. Lisa grinned satisfactorily at my response. I guess I won't be able to win against her, but I feel like we can be together forever because we understand the same kind of pain. Next time, I'll propose with a proper ring. I make the declaration while shyly looking away. Lisa bursts into laughter and says, "I'm looking forward to it." What did you think of that? Subscribing the channel would be a great motivation for me to create more content. See you in the next video. I never imagined ending up like this for a business social. "Hey, you've been looking grim, James. Hey, you, help him loosen up a bit. Seems like James is interested in you." The drunk CEO called over a VIP hostess who was attending to a colleague next to us. It was because I had been intently watching that hostess. As instructed, the VIP hostess sat down next to me, reached out towards me, and started to touch me. She moved her gel-polished fingertips slowly. Just being touched by her feminine, gentle hands made my body tense. I was looking at her beautiful face, feeling extremely nervous. "My name is James Taylor. I'm a 31-year-old divorced man working in hospital administration. I divorced my wife, Jane, 3 years ago. Jane was a truly wonderful woman, and I still sincerely appreciate that I met her. So why did we divorce? The blunt truth is, being with me was nothing but a negative for Jane. James, I'm home. I'm making dinner now." Jane would say that and rush into the kitchen. However, she was surprised to see that I had already prepared stew. "It's okay. I've already prepared dinner. You must be tired from working late, right? Let's have dinner together." I thought she'd be happy, but to my surprise, Jane had a gloomy look on her face. Stew was supposed to be one of her favorite dishes, so I wondered what was wrong. James, I'm sorry." Sorry for what? I didn't understand why Jane was apologizing. But then, she said something unexpected. "I'm the worst. Having my husband make dinner. From now on, I'll prepare something in advance when I'll be late from work. You don't have to do that. No, it's my policy to balance both work and housework." Jane said that and continued to blame herself throughout dinner. For me, it was not a bother at all to cook for Jane. I was excited and looked forward to her return home, hoping she'd enjoy the meal. I thought that in this day and age, housework shouldn't just be a woman's responsibility, but should be a shared task between spouses. But apparently Jane didn't see it that way. Jane and I are the same age. After graduating from a prestigious private university, she started working at a major bank. She's a competent woman. We met at a social gathering, and I immediately fell for Jane, who is serious and intellectual. It seems Jane also had a good impression of me, and after 6 months of dating, We got married when we were 27. I admired Jane not only for her kindness but also as a person. However, within the first year of our marriage, I started to feel like I wasn't being a good husband for her. I usually got home from work on time, but Jane was always swamped with work and had to do overtime every day. She's a competent employee, and the company has high expectations for her as a future leader. I supported her and wished she would let me handle the household chores so she could focus on her work. But as I mentioned, Jane was a perfectionist and didn't seem to want me to do the housework. "I can't let my husband do the housework," she would say every time I offered to help. But it was clear that her work was getting more demanding. Despite her dedication to balance work and household chores, she was visibly wearing herself out day by day. She must have been extremely tired. She has become less talkative and more hysterical on more occasions. Just the other day, when I suggested getting takeout since she didn't want me to cook, the conversation took a terrible turn. "So you're saying the food I make isn't good enough?" "No, that's not what I mean." I tried to calm her down, but she didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. I know Jane didn't act that way because she wanted to fight with me. She was simply at her limit. Not wanting to push my beloved wife any further, I proposed a divorce to Jane. "I see. Divorce, huh?" Jane quietly accepted my proposal. Of course, since I was the one who suggested the divorce, I intended to pay alimony. But Jane declined. Even though the amount might not mean much to her as she was working for a big corporation, it was a matter of my feelings. I explained this to her, but she still refused. "It's fine. I understand that I wasn't a good wife. No one would love someone like me." Unlike the hysterical Jane I had known recently, she looked genuinely sad at that moment. Still in love with Jane, I yearned to hold her tightly in my arms. The wish will never come true since we've decided to divorce. There must be plenty of men more suitable for Jane than I am. So, we got divorced and began separate lives. After divorcing Jane, my co-worker and friend, Mark, suggested I should seek new relationships. "You're still young. Let's look for a new romance. I'll set up a mixer for you." I appreciated Mark's sentiment, but I wasn't quite ready to meet someone. Apparently, I loved Jane more deeply than I thought. It also seemed somewhat inappropriate to look for another woman so soon after divorcing Jane. I felt guilty, wondering whether I, who had caused Jane sadness, had the right to find happiness. Now that I was divorced, with more time to spare, I began to devote myself to work more than ever. Thanks to that, I was given more responsibility at work. Lately, I've been personally noticed by the director of the hospital, which I'm grateful for. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since I divorced Jane. However, I hadn't been involved with any women since then, and there wasn't a single day I forgot about Jane. Even though our relationship was supposed to be over, she would likely continue to live in my heart. Living a life of going back and forth between work and home, one day, the CEO suggested we all go for drinks at a club in downtown LA. "I'd like to deepen our friendship with you guys, who have been managing the hospital administration so appropriately. Of course, it's all on me." To be honest, I wasn't very interested in this proposal. I'd never visited such a place before and wasn't interested in women right now. Even if I were to be entertained in this state, I didn't think I would enjoy it. But I suppose it's time to grow up. Since the CEO had made the suggestion, it wouldn't be right for only me to be absent. Thus I, along with other members of the group, visited a high-class club in downtown LA. This club has a nice atmosphere, and there are only wonderful women here. I'm sure everyone will be satisfied. The CEO said that and enthusiastically led the way into the club. Indeed, as the CEO said, it was a beautiful club with a good atmosphere. I, who had a flashy and flamboyant impression, felt relieved when I saw the calm ambience of the club and thought I might be able to drink peacefully here. The hostess, Catherine, who led our group to our seats, was also a wonderful, classy person. "We've been waiting for you, everyone." The young hostess, who is called Mia, greeted us warmly. "It's a pleasure to have you here, gentlemen. Let me show you to your table. Please enjoy yourselves." A woman who seemed to be the manager, called Catherine, stepped back as a young hostess, seemingly a favorite of the boss, led us to our table. Each of us had a hostess to attend to us, but I was utterly astonished by one of them. What a surprise! Standing before me in a dress was my ex-wife, Jane. Jane, why is she here? Jane, now dressed in a vibrant dress and heavily made up, looked nothing like the woman I remembered. But there was no doubt about it, it was Jane. There was no way I could mistake the face of my wife whom I loved so much. Jane too noticed my presence, and her eyes, adorned with eyeshadow, widened. For a moment, it felt as if time had stopped between us, but of course, no one around us noticed. The girls distributed themselves evenly among the tables and began serving us. Jane didn't come to my side, but instead sat next to a colleague of mine, Carl. Carl, faced with Jane, began chattering excitedly. Getting to be entertained by such a beauty. "What's your name?" "It's Janet." If she introduced herself as Janet, then it must indeed be Jane. With this strong belief, I stole glances at Jane while chatting with the other hostesses. I couldn't help but wonder why Jane, who had once worked for a large corporation, was now working at a club as a hostess in downtown LA. Jane had always been quite a beauty, but she now looked even more refined. Her makeup was flawless and her dress fit her perfectly. Could this air of elegance indicate that she had been working as a hostess for quite a while? All sorts of thoughts were racing through my head, but I couldn't get drunk despite drinking alcohol. In contrast, the CEO, completely wasted, blurted out something unthinkable. "You seem a bit uptight, James. Hey, you, why don't you help him relax? It seems like James is interested in you." The intoxicated boss called over Jane, who was serving Carl. It was because I had been gazing at Jane. As if being ordered, Jane sat next to me, stretched out her hand towards me, and started to touch me. She moved her fingers, beautifully painted with gel nails, slowly. Being touched by such feminine, graceful hands, my body stiffened. She, too, had a bitter look on her face. Jane must never have imagined running into her ex-husband in a place like this. As she touched my thigh over my suit, I, filled with intense nervousness, looked into the face of Janet, or rather, Jane. Up close, I couldn't help but be taken aback by her sultriness and beauty, accentuated by her vibrant makeup. But at the same time, I was getting a somewhat tired impression from Jane. Of course, hospitality work can be a tough job, and fatigue would inevitably accumulate. Yet, beyond that, I felt a shade of worry in her, as if she was troubled by life itself. Janet has got your heart racing, hasn't she, James? With no way of knowing what was going on in my heart, the onlookers, including the boss, were laughing amusingly. In the midst of all this, only Jane and I, each with our own thoughts kept hidden, wrapped up the night at the club. Why was Jane working as a hostess? I may be overstepping, but I want to know. Thus thinking, I sent Jane an email for the first time in 3 years. The email seemed to have arrived, but there was no reply even after a week. Perhaps being contacted by me may have been annoying to Jane. But something stuck in my mind, so I decided to visit Jane's family home directly. According to a mutual acquaintance, Jane is currently living at her family home. I quickly decided to take some cookies and visit Jane's family home on my next day off. Actually, this is my second time visiting Jane's family home. Jane's parents were self-employed, affluent and refined people. But they seemed to have a policy of not getting too involved with their daughter, so my introduction to her parent was casual. I thought they would ask me more about myself, so I was somewhat taken aback when they calmly approved our marriage. Jane had said this about it. My parents are obsessed with my sister Alice, and they don't care about me. Jane has an older sister named Alice. While Jane was a refined beauty, Alice was a glamorous beauty with modeling experience. Still, to my eyes, Jane was the more attractive of the two. Alice had led a splendid life and was married to a man who ran an accounting firm. She is a woman who belonged to what you might call the winning team. From Jane's parents' point of view, they may have gone through many twists and turns when raising Alice, as she is the eldest daughter. But when it came to their second daughter, Jane, I assumed they realized there was no need to interfere so much in her upbringing and approached it with a detached attitude. However, when I visited Jane's family home, I was confronted with a shocking reality. Why is it so run down? After a long time, I was astonished to see Jane's family home. The building itself was large and grand, but the garden was completely overgrown. Even though a gardener used to visit regularly and the garden was always kept neat, now the weeds were growing wild and there was even bulky trash left outside. Feeling uncomfortable, I stepped onto the property of the house and heard a loud yelling voice. "You useless person, I want a soda, go get it for me now." When I went toward the voice, I found an obese woman with a shaggy head yelling at Jane in front of the entrance. Who is this person? I wondered for a moment, before recognizing her as Alice. Seeing the drastically changed appearance of Alice, who was once so beautiful, I was at a loss for words. What on earth happened to her? I was sneaking around in the shadows to check on the two of them. "Okay, I'll go." After being yelled at by Alice, Jane responded in a faint voice. There were deep dark circles under Jane's eyes, and though I hadn't noticed it when she was wearing a long dress at the club, her shorts revealed a large bruise on her leg. In a split second, I began to suspect that Jane might be experiencing regular harassment from Alice. "You're enjoying making me suffer, aren't you? Like in our college days, you're sabotaging my happiness, aren't you?" Becoming emotional, Alice tried to forcefully grab Jane's shoulder. Jane was trembling in fear, her body shrinking away. Unable to bear the sight any longer, I called out, "Jane," and grabbed her hand. Then we both took off running. A stunned Alice shrieked hysterically, "Where are you going?" But I paid her no mind. I ushered Jane into my car and drove off. While in a daze, Jane finally spoke up. "Why are you here? I saw you at the club the other day and I've been worried about you. You look pale now and that bruise. Can you tell me what happened? It has nothing to do with you, since we're divorced, right? Please, take me home. If I don't get back soon, my sisters will scold me." Jane said so, and repeatedly begged me to drive back to her parents' house. Why would she want to go back there? I told Jane, "I can't let you go back to that house." She clearly needed rest and a calm environment. I decided to take Jane to the hospital. She seemed very tired, so the doctor decided to administer an 4-drip and have her admitted to the hospital for a month. I felt immense gratitude towards the understanding doctor. Although Jane initially resisted strongly, she soon fell into a deep sleep on the hospital bed, likely due to extreme fatigue. During this time, Alice kept calling Jane's phone over and over. I listened to the voicemails Alice left. They were nothing more than threats. "Jane, where on earth are you? If you don't come home, you won't get away with it." While frightened by Alice's hysteria, I waited for Jane to recover. The hospital also judged that Jane needed mental care, so she started receiving psychiatric treatment while regaining her physical strength. Many more injuries were found on Jane's body, revealing that she had been suffering regular abuse. Once Jane was finally well enough for a face-to-face conversation, I decided to talk to her in the hospital room. She had lost over 10 pounds since I saw her at the club, and her complexion was po. "I've caused you trouble, haven't I? I never thought my body was screaming for help to the point where I had to undergo such extensive treatment. You've really been pushing yourself too hard. Can you tell me exactly what happened?" "Okay, actually." With that, Jane began to explain everything that had transpired. After our divorce, Jane discovered that the family business her parents ran had fallen on hard times when she returned home. Her sister, Alice, had also returned home after her divorce, the result of an affair Alice had. From my point of view, Alice had it coming, but the shock of her divorce led her to overeat, and she has fallen into her current hysterical state. Despite the already strained household finances, Alice had been recklessly spending money to relieve her stress. To help her struggling family, Jane had taken up a second job as a hostess in downtown LA. She was commanded by her parents to bring in some income to help the family through their financial crisis. Jane did her best to protect her family, but eventually, the bank discovered her side job as a hostess and she was fired. She is now taking care of Alice and doing all the housework during the day, while working as a hostess at night. I couldn't believe all of this happened without my knowledge. Regardless of the circumstances, the burden on Jane was far too great. "Why do you have to go so far?" "I have no choice. I've caused a lot of trouble for my parents and my sister." According to Jane, her parents had always favored Alice. Wanting her parents' attention, Jane devoted herself to studying. However, she failed to get into her first-choice public university and ended up attending a private university. Jane's mother, Michelle, had constantly told her, "We paid a lot of money for you to attend private university. Be grateful." Also, there was a dispute between Jane and Alice when Jane was a college student. At the time, Alice had a boyfriend. Midway through their relationship, Alice's boyfriend grew tired of her self-centered behavior and, unbelievably, began to fall for Jane. When Alice found it out, she was so shocked that she overdosed on pills and was rushed to the hospital. Their parents, devastated, rushed to the hospital and constantly blamed Jane. "Poor Alice, it's all because of you, Jane. You seduced him and caused this." Jane's father, Thomas, even said, "It would have been better if you were the one being rushed to the hospital, not Alice." Whether it was a flashback to that time or not, Jane continued speaking, tears streaming down her face. "I've caused trouble for my parents and deeply hurt my sister. That's why I must serve my family, and without that, I have no value." "That's not true." I grabbed Jane's shoulders and looked straight into her eyes. Her eyes, filled with tears, met mine. Even when we were married, we never had such a profound eye contact. "Jane, you don't need to associate with anyone who doesn't value you, even if they're your blood relatives. Besides, I love you from the bottom of my heart, no matter what, so never say you have no value." "James." When Jane called my name, she wrapped her arms around my back. Even without further words, we felt a deep understanding of each other's feelings. I knew then I would never let go of Jane. It was a moment of profound realization. Later on, Jane's parents repeatedly demanded me to give Jane back. So, I went directly to Jane's house and played them a recording. I have recorded everything clearly, including what happened that day with Alice. If you try to interfere with Jane again, I will also step up. I warned them. After I said that, the three of them looked as if they had bitten into a sour lemon. "What, then? Who's gonna take care of me?" Alice wailed as she said that, but surprisingly, we were able to cleanly and easily sever ties with her toxic parents. Jane's former home was in dire straits, unable to make ends meet and considering bankruptcy. It's pitiful indeed, having to take care of Alice in such a situation. After cutting ties with her family, and a year later, Jane and I got married again. Jane got a job in the administration department of a company. She was a former banker and an excellent one at that, so she often had to work overtime due to her colleagues relying on her. "I'll be late today. Could you prepare something for dinner?" "Sure, I'll cook whatever you want." "Really? Then, I want a gratin." "All right, leave it to me," I said, making fists pump. True love is not about wanting something from the other person. It's about wanting to do something for them. I want to do something for her. This thoughtfulness is love. I can proudly say that meeting such a person makes me the luckiest man in the world.